Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for tuning in this evening. I'm going to check real quick, set my timer so we can get this recorded at the right time. Okay, well, this evening is our second actual episode of my Jewish Interfaith worship and Torah broadcasts, and so really appreciate you tuning in again tonight. A couple of quick notes before we begin the service. First of all, for the prayer book, the Siddur, we'll be using the one from the One Shul Community Prayer Book. You can find it online on their website. I have a link to it in PDF format on my website, yakovmatz@yahoo.com. Just click on the webcast link on the front page. Or you can buy it as an ebook. And if you like it, I encourage you to buy it as an ebook because this supports the important work of the One Shul community. I know it's available for Kindle and I believe also for Nook, the Barnes & Noble version. That's what I have on my Nook e-reader we will be using tonight. And as far as page numbers and whatnot, it'll be based on the page numbers of the Nook e-reader. So, anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Oh, one other thing, for those of you watching at home, I encourage you to have a couple of things handy for later in the service. One is to have your candles ready for the candle lighting time. Also, encourage you to have bread and wine handy. There'll be later on some time for that. So let me get one thing I need, and then we will get started. Okay. Well, for our welcoming time, I want to sing a song and invite you to join in called Barku. And it's a really old song from the Jewish Renewal Movement. I learned it from One Shul, from Ketzira's Rosh Chodesh service, but I've since learned it's a very common song. Probably actually has its roots in an old Hare Krishna song. So I like it as a call to worship for that reason, because it is truly an interfaith song. But also just such a beautiful song of welcome. And the words of it go, Baruchu, or blessed be, dear one, Shekinah, the glory of God, or the Spirit of God, or the presence of God, is a feminine word. Holy name, when I call on the name of my soul, I come home. So as we sing this together, I'd like you to think of this as a welcome to you, as the viewers out there, but also as you sing this, you're welcoming all the other participants, all the others who will be watching this in the coming days. Baku, dear one, Shekinah, holy name, when I call on the light of my soul, I come home. Baku, dear one, Shekinah, holy name, when I call on the light of my soul, I come home. Baku, dear one, Shekinah, holy name, when I call on the light of my soul, I come home. Let's now take a deep breath together, centering ourselves, bringing us present to this moment as we continue on in this time of connection with the divine. It's now time for the next part of the service, which is the lighting of the candles. And if you're using the prayer book, it's on page 44. The prayer is for that. Page 44. And while I'm pulling that up, I'll show you these same ones I used last week. These little candlestick holders are made out of recycled bicycle chains from India. They're kind of cool. Now, I like them because I'm a bicyclist. It's also a symbol to me of renewal, of reconnection, recycling. To me, it's a very powerful image, and I like it as an entry point for our prayers. Okay, starting on page 44. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvatov v'tzvanu lahadlik ner Shabbat. Amen. I am grateful to you, Creator of all, for the chance to make myself holy before you. By creating light. I love candles. Next, it's time for the blessing of the bread and wine, and that's on page 70 of the prayer book. You know, I'm kind of excited tonight for the bread. I really like matzah bread myself. Challah bread is more traditional, but matzah bread, the unleavened bread, I really like it. It's crispy, it's fun. But tonight I thought, instead of buying the boxed matzah, I went ahead and tried making my own, and I made several batches. The first batch is not so great. This batch is pretty decent. So y'all can see it. I have a little piece of it. The ingredients of it are it's about half whole wheat flour, half white flour, a little bit of water, some olive oil, and then I added a few herbs. I added some rosemary and I think some basil to it. Anyway, this final batch turned out pretty decently. I still have more to do, more experimenting, but I liked this batch. So that's our bread, and then of course for the wine I have it here as well. And for those of you watching, if you don't like alcohol, you can drink grapefruit juice as well. Either one is fine. So let's see. We bless the wine first. My house we usually do the other way around, but in this prayer book they do the wine, so we'll do the wine. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam bori hagafen. I am grateful to you, Creator of all, for bringing forth the fruit of the vine. This moment I like to take a smell of it, savor the moment, and then let us drink. Amen. And then for the bread. And so I break it, and I have my piece here, and I pray. Oh, I lost my page number. Back to page 70. This is the negative of the ebook. Okay, let us pray. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. I am grateful to you, Creator of all, for bringing forth bread from the earth. And let us eat. And then I have this batch of matzah. I really like it. It has a little crunch to it finally. The previous versions were a little more like tortillas, but this is a little more cracker-like the matzah is supposed to be, at least to me. Well, now we're at the time of our service for our Torah conversation. Tonight's passage comes from the last of the Parshat, the last Torah portion of the book of Numbers. And this one is Masei. And it begins in Numbers chapter 33, verse 1, continues to the end of the book. There's a lot of interesting things that happen here. We will not have time to go into all of them. There's just too much good stuff here. But it begins at this point in the story. Remember last week, too, was a very dark point in the story. We wrestled with the issues of the genocide of the Mennonites and what that says about human nature what it says about the heroes of the story, the Hebrews, and Moses himself. And so this week continues some of the difficult things, but also maybe also gives us a big picture view of everything. So the first portion of this text deals with a recounting, where that Moses gives a reminder to the people of where they had journeyed, talking about from their departure from Ramses in Egypt, and then from there, all things that happened to them, and taking them to the present moment. And I liked this idea, this recounting of critical events, because I think it's important for us all to remember this. I think that sometimes it's easy for us to take for granted where we've been and how far we've come. And so I like that Moses gives this recounting and ties it to their faith, ties it to their identity as a people. Then after that, the text moves into a discussion of the division of the land. They would be divided among the 12 tribes. Now bear in mind at this point, they have not yet entered into the land. They've come into the east side of the Jordan, the Transjordan. And so in this area, some of the tribes have settled, but the remaining tribes that will cross over to the west of the Jordan have yet to receive their land. Nonetheless, a certain act of confidence here, and to me this seems like a lot of confidence building, faith building. They go ahead and decide how the land is to be apportioned anyway. And so the next section goes into detail about the boundaries of the land. After this, a discussion of the Levites. And the Levites were the priestly tribe, and they were not to receive their own land allotment like the other tribes, but rather were to be scattered throughout the people. I saw one really neat Torah commentary video, and it was a really neat animated video. I might post a link to it on the website. We gave a summary of this Torah portion of Masei, and they made the point that these cities that were set up for the Levites were not just a matter of giving the Levites their due as priests, but also creating the idea of dispersing out learning. In other words, this learned class, the Levites, would not solely be at Jerusalem or be at some other headquarters, but rather be scattered throughout the land, that they would be cities in each of the tribes. And these cities would be cities of learning, but also will be cities of justice, as we'll read in just a moment. And that begins, we're going to pick up, and I'm going to read a little bit of this, is in Numbers chapter 35, in verse 9. The Lord spoke further to Moses, "Speak to the Israelite people and say to them, when you cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan, you shall provide yourselves with places to serve you as cities of refuge, to which a manslayer who has killed a person unintentionally may flee. The city shall serve you as a refuge from the avenger, so that the manslayer may not die until he has stood trial before the assembly. The towns that you thus assign shall be 6 cities of refuge in all. 3 cities shall be designated beyond the Jordan, and the other 3 shall be designated in the land of Canaan. They shall serve as cities of refuge. These 6 cities shall serve the Israelites and the resident aliens among them for refuge, so that anyone who kills a person unintentionally may flee there. Anyone, however, who strikes another with an iron object so that death results is a murderer. The murderer must be put to death. If he struck him with a stone tool that could cause death, and death resulted, he is a murderer. The murderer must be put to death. Similarly, if the object with which he struck him was a wooden tool that could cause death, and death resulted, he is a murderer. The murderer must be put to death. The blood avenger himself shall put the murderer to death. It is he shall have put him to death upon encounter. So too, if he pushed him in hate, or hurled something at him on purpose, and death resulted, or if he struck him with his hand in enmity, and death resulted, the assailant shall be put to death. He is a murderer. The blood avenger shall put the murderer to death upon encounter. But if he pushed him without malice aforethought, or hurled any object at him unintentionally, or inadvertently dropped upon him any deadly object of stone, and death resulted, though he was not an enemy of his, and did not seek his arm, in such cases the assembly shall decide between the slayer and the blood avenger. The assembly shall protect the manslayer from the blood avenger, and the assembly shall restore him to the city of refuge to which he fled, and there he shall remain until the death of the high priest who is anointed with the sacred oil. But if the manslayer ever goes outside the limits of the city of refuge to which he has fled, and the blood avenger comes upon him outside the limits of his city of refuge, and the blood avenger kills the manslayer, there is no blood guilt on his account, for he must remain inside a city of refuge until the death of the high priest. After the death of the high priest, the manslayer may return to his land holding. Such shall be your law of procedure throughout the ages in all your settlements. And it goes on, talks about the fact that eyewitness testimony is necessary for an execution for murder. Then also it says that you cannot accept a ransom for the life of the murderer, meaning that rich murderers are not allowed to buy their freedom. And that then finally, jumping down to verse 33, it says, you shall not pollute the land in which you live, for blood pollutes the land, and the land can have no expiation for blood that is shed on it, except by the blood of him who shed it. You shall not defile the land in which you live, in which I myself abide, for I, the Lord, abide among the Israelite people. We'll come back to this, but I do want to say real quick that the final portion of this Parsha text deals with rules of inheritance, particularly in families where there are no male heirs and what happens then. Interesting topic, but we won't have time for it. I want to go back now, though, to the issue of the cities of refuge, because this is a really interesting topic. On the surface, it's very easy to write this off, to say this is a barbaric, terrible text. It's easy to see it that way. There is a legalistic coldness to it, which is kind of troubling. At the same time, it reads, frankly, quite a bit like our criminal statutes. As some of you know, I'm also an attorney in real life, and so I've read a lot of statutes, and this reads like it. It gives a fair amount of detail, explaining the statutory provisions, explaining in detail what constitutes murder, what constitutes involuntary murder or manslaughter. Frankly, in some ways better than some of the statutes in some locales. What's difficult about this text is what its blanket endorsement of the death penalty is troubling for a lot of reasons, but also this idea, emphasis on the blood avenger. Well, I looked at some of the commentaries on this, and the best one I saw was the JPS Jewish Publication Society commentary on this text. And they brought up some really good points. First of all, they argued you have to put this in the context of his day, in the ancient Near East. And in this world, in the surrounding cultures around them, the rule was vengeance, meaning that if someone commits murder, the family of the one who has been murdered has the right, even the responsibility, to go out and kill the one who did the killing, get paybacks. But if that was, you couldn't get them, then it would be good enough sometimes as to instead inflict harm upon the family of the one who had done the murder. Well, this made me think about something and realize that this is a common trend in lots of world cultures, not just the Middle East. I have some Cherokee ancestors, and so I've studied a fair bit about Cherokee history and about the Cherokee cultures. And one of the interesting things is their idea in the ancient times about criminal justice, pre-European contact. In the early days, the spirituality, which was reflected in the legal system, was very much based on the idea of balance. And what that meant was that if a person was murdered by a member of one clan, and there were, I think, 12 clans for the Cherokee, if I remember right. Another interesting parallel to Judaism with the 12 tribes. But in Cherokee culture, if someone from one clan killed a member of another clan, then the aggrieved clan could seek vengeance. And it wasn't really necessary to seek vengeance upon the person who committed the murder. If you could, that's great. But it really was, because it's about a cosmic kind of justice thing between the clans, it was more important that the wrongdoing clan was punished. In other words, the clan as a whole was punished. It was about the families involved. Well, this text in the book of Numbers is written out of the same cultural context, where that, as important as individual conduct may be, it's much more important family conduct, tribal conduct. And so this idea about the blood avenger is a important concept here. One of the things here about this blood avenger, it might be better translated as redeemer, or someone who makes things right. It's very much, again, very similar to that Cherokee idea of setting things right, restoring the balance. Now, in the culture that they were in, the surrounding culture, and what the Jewish faith sprung out of in the ancient Near East, One could argue that this text in Numbers is actually a more humane, more tempered, more measured version of the previous rule. The previous version focused just on revengeance, while this text recognizes that sometimes good people make mistakes, and that accidents can happen, and that if a death results in an accident, the person should not be put to death who committed it. And so there's a bit of a legal loophole. The old rule about vengeance still applies. In other words, if the aggrieved family catches the murderer outside the city of refuge, they can kill the murderer, no questions asked, whether the original murderer was innocent or whether the person, they had to have actually committed the crime, but whether they were doing it on purpose or not doesn't matter. However, once they reached the city of refuge, that's where the loophole was created. And at this point, the person, as long as they stayed in the city of refuge, they were safe. They were tried there in the city of refuge. There would be a trial held before the assembly. In this case, remember, this is a Levite city, so this is the learned class of people, priests and scribes and whatnot, who would decide whether the person is guilty or innocent. If they decided that they were innocent of intentionally causing the harm, the person who committed the crime or committed the killing would stay in the city of refuge. As long as they stayed there, they would be safe. And then at the death of the next high priest, the idea being is that the high priest's death would satisfy the bloodlust, presumably of God here, and of the family who had been killed. It's a little bit of a bizarre notion, but I would argue that what we're seeing in this text is an evolution of a more humane version of a prior oral tradition. And so, and I'm putting now on my Interfaith Mennonite hat, is that when I read this text, I'm seeing a point in evolution of the Jewish people and continuing evolution of our ideas about God, ideas about justice. This is not the stopping point. Rather, this is a intermediate point. I think that today the death penalty is clearly wrong because it is so focused on the idea of vengeance, because it is given out in a discriminatory fashion. We know for a fact in Oklahoma, where I'm from, and many other places as well, that those who are executed are more likely to be poor than rich, they're more likely to be people of color rather than white people, and the murderers of white people are more likely to be executed than the murderers of non-white people. Now it's interesting, actually the Numbers text is a bit more evolved in one sense than our current day is, because the issue of rich and poor was eliminated. In the ancient world of that time, while vengeance was the rule, ransom was also the rule, meaning that in those days, in the surrounding cultures that the Hebrew people were surrounded by, if someone committed a crime, they committed, say, a murder, for instance, if they did not want to suffer the penalty for that, the family of the murderer could pay off the victim's family. Of course, the problem with that is a poor person can't afford to do that, and so they're going to die, while the rich person can afford to pay them off. The law of Moses takes that out of the equation, says it shouldn't matter whether you're rich or poor as to whether you get punished or not. And so that is a remarkably progressive idea. But I would argue that we're seeing here an evolution of the text and the evolution of the ideas here. And this is a rewrite of a previous oral history, and hence we're going to see further, the rest of Scripture, arguably, is a further commentary on these ideas. And so I think as important as taking the text seriously, we also have to see the text itself is a malleable thing. And the text itself points to further evolution, further consideration, and further change. And that part of being faithful to the tradition is being faithful to the concept of change. So, that's my message for this week. Well, as we get ready for to close our service, now I want to have our blessing after the Torah study, and that's on page 93 of the prayer book, page 93. Let's see here. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'kayei olam nata betokenu. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah. Blessed are